Yesterday we had this assignment, which was graphing a line given a point and a slope. The notes from yesterday was graphing with y equals mx plus b. So make sure that this is glued in, your page number is in there, and the title is there as well. Graphing with y equals mx plus b. So today we are going to talk about another way to graph. So one way to graph is by using a point and a slope. So in order to graph, let's just look at the first one. This is x, this is y. You would plot the point and then do your slope rise over run. So plot the point, -2, +4. And then if we have a slope of -1, that means down 1. And then right 3. So we went down 1 and right 3 to find another point. You keep on following that same pattern for the entire graph. Down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3, down 1, right 3. And then you do the opposite. You go up 1, left 3. You have to do the complete opposite on both directions. Rise 1, run 1, 2, 3. 1 over 3, up 1 over 3. Once you get your points, then you can draw your line. They should all fall in line with one another. Put arrows on the end. So you'll do the same thing for these two. Let's just look at this one real quick. It says 6, 2, slope of 0. So is this hoy or is this bucks? Hoy. Hoy, because it's a slope of 0. If it was undefined, then it would be bucks. So this means this is going to be a horizontal line. I'm not going to do it with you, just wanted to review that. And then to graph an equation given the y equals mx plus b form, we know we plot our y-intercept first, and then we do our slope rise over run. So pay attention to your negative signs. That means it's going to be going downhill. All right, so now I want you to just put this to the side, and we are going to learn another method of graphing. Graphing using your x and y intercepts. So an x-intercept is a point where our graph crosses the x-axis. X-intercept, where it crosses the x-axis. X-intercepts happen when the y is 0. To find the x-intercept from an equation, replace y or f of x. So f of x is the same thing as saying y. It's a function of x. We're going to replace y with 0 and solve for x. The x-intercept is also known as, aka, also known as the solution, a 0, a root, so if you're asked, what is the solution to this linear function that's being graphed, then you would find your x-intercept. Or they could ask, what is the 0 to the function that is graphed? You would find your x-intercept. X-intercept goes with these two. Y-intercept doesn't. But on your EOC and on your test, you will see those words being used. With an x-intercept, we write it as a point where we have a number for x and a 0 for y. do not just write one number is my x-intercept. You're going to write it as a coordinate, an x value and a y value. X-intercepts have 0 for y. Okay, let's look at y-intercept. A y-intercept is the point where a graph crosses the y-axis. Y-intercepts happen when the x is 0. So to find the x-intercept, you're going to let x equal 0. So to find a y-intercept from an equation, replace x with 0 and solve for y. So let's look at the graph that we have right here. We're going to find the intercepts. So if we look, this arrow is pointing to our y-axis, where the line crosses the y-axis. So this is our y-intercept. And we're going to write our y-intercept as 0 for x and the number for y. So that's at 4. So 0, 4. The other arrow is pointing to the x-axis, where it crosses the x-axis. So that is our x-intercept. It's also called a 0, a solution, and a root. So write all of those names there, because you could be asked in any one of those ways. What is the 0? What is the solution? What is the root? What is the x-intercept? So this is the point that's 2, 0. So when you're asked what are the intercepts, write them as coordinates. Okay, so let's look at these examples. We're going to write our x and y intercepts just by looking at the graph. So the first one, this is your x-intercept, because it's where it crosses the x-axis. So that is at 4, 0. And then your y-intercept right here. I'm going to abbreviate intercept with just an INT. And so that's at 0, -3. Let's look at the next one. We have our x-intercept right here. So that is at 1, 0. And our y-intercept, 0, -2. Okay. If we're given an equation and we want to graph it using our intercepts, we usually have it in the ax plus by form. That's our standard form. Anytime you have your equation written in that standard form, it's easiest to find your intercepts and graph it. So see how this is written as 2x plus 4y equals 16? So we're going to find the x-intercept first. So it asks, what is the value of y at the x-intercept? The y is 0. So that means I'm going to substitute in. So sub in 0 for y. sub or plug in. So I would plug in a 0 here for y to find what x is. But the really cool thing about this is if I put in a 0 here, 4 times 0 is 0. So it really just goes away. And all we're left with is 2x equals 16. Then we're solving for x. So we divide by 2. We get x equals 8. So then our x-intercept is at 8, 0. Another way to look at this is what some teachers teach you is if you're finding your x-intercept, you're just going to cover up your y and solve the equation that's left. So see how I cover that up and I'm just left with 2x equals 16 and then I solved it.
So what do you do with your y?
So whenever you have your x-intercept, the y is 0.
Okay.
So the y is 0. So it disappears basically because if you multiply 4 times 0, you get 0. So it's gone. So 8, 0. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I did not create enough here. 7. Let's say that this is 8.
We could go by 2s.
We could go by 2s. Yeah. If you want to go by 2s, you're welcome to do that. And then to find your y-intercept, we are setting x equal to 0. So that means I'm going to sub in 0 for x. So if I plug in a 0 here, 2 times 0 is 0. So I could just cover it up and solve what's left. So I have 4y equals 16. How do I solve that? Divide by 4. And what do I get?
4.
Yep. And it needs to be written as a point. So that's 0 for x, 4 for y. Y-intercepts have a value for y. X-intercepts have a value for x. So we'll plot that. And then connect them to make your line. As long as you have 2 points, that's all you need in order to graph. So it's a 0 slope. I mean a negative slope. That's what I meant to say. All right, let's go to the next 3 problems. The last 3. Graph using intercepts. So we could always solve for y and say y equals mx plus b. But what I'm teaching you right now is graphing using intercepts. So that's how I want you to graph these. So you're going to find your x-intercept on each one. Graph that. And then find your y-intercept. Because sometimes it's easier to just graph using intercepts because all you're doing is solving for one variable, letting the y variable be 0 and solving for the x. So if I were to plug in a 0 for the y here, then that goes away so I can cover it up. And what do I have left? X equals 5. That's it. So I just covered up the y, which what I'm really doing is making y equals 0 and seeing what's left, x equals 5. write it as a coordinate though. X is 5 when y is 0. So 5, 0. And then the y-intercept, we're going to make x equal 0. So if I cover up the x, I need to write down what's left after the x is zeroed out. I get negative 5y equals 5. Divide by a negative 5 all the way through. Negative 1. And so in our y-intercept, our y value is negative 1 and our x value is 0. So there is one of the points. That's your y-intercept, 0, negative 1. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0 is our x-intercept. Okay, so what I want you to do is the next two examples. Let me give you a few more seconds to finish, and we'll check over your work. Okay, let's look at the second one. So to find the x-intercept, we make y go to 0, and that just leaves us with 2x, negative 2x, equals negative 12. So we divide by a negative 2. We get x equals negative 12 divided by a negative 2, positive 6. So that means our coordinate is 6, 0. So 2, 4, 6. Okay, let's look at the y-intercept. For the y-intercept, we make the x equal 0. And so that zeroes it out. All we have left is 4y equals negative 12. Divide by 4. We get y equals negative 3. Which that would be 0, negative 3 as a coordinate. So we have 2 points. Connect them to make your line. Okay, let's go to the next one. The y value will be 0. So we'll cover it up and we get negative half x equals negative 4. Do you remember how to get rid of fractions as your coefficients? Yeah, so we're going to multiply it by a negative 2 over 1, or just times a negative 2. Negative 2 over 1 is just negative 2. So then that's x equals negative 4 times a negative 2 is 8. And somebody asks, like, how does that work? Well, think back to if you take half of something and get 4, what are you taking half of to get 4? You're taking half of 8, yeah. So that's how that works. Okay, so this point would be 8, 0. So we could go by 2's, 2, 4, 6, 8. If I go by 2's on my x-axis, I can go by 1's on my y-axis. Or if I want to keep it square and proportional, I really need to go by 2's on my y-axis too. So then we would cover up the x-axis because we plug in a 0. Zero's out, and all we're left with is y equals negative 4. So my coordinate is 0, negative 4. So connect your dots. All right, so you're going to glue this in your journal. And let's look at your assignment real quick before y'all glue it in. Look on the back. It says graph using intercepts exit ticket. Identify the x and y intercept on the graph. You need to write these as coordinates. Do not write it just as one number. You need an x and a y in order to write it. If there isn't an x or a y intercept, you can just put none. Okay, so then you're going to find your x and y intercepts on 4, 5, and 6. And then 7 and 8, it says graph using intercepts. Label the points where the line crosses the axis. Okay, so make sure you finish this and then you can turn it in.